Hi, Satya. It's an honor to welcome you here at the WeAce Spotlight Series. To introduce you to our audience, Satya is a trailblazing leader, entrepreneur, and renowned speaker, celebrated for her tireless efforts in bridging the worlds of data, leadership, culture, and inclusion. As the founder and CEO of True Change, she empowers organizations to build sustainable and inclusive workplaces by harnessing the power of data and storytelling. With a remarkable career spanning roles at global giants like Chanel, HSBC, Deloitte, and Barclays, culminating in her recognition as one of the top 100 ethical minority executives. Satya's passion project, My Skin, My Story, is a testament of her commitment to empowering women of color worldwide. We are thrilled to have you here to share your thoughts and insights and experiences with us today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
To get started, when we're looking back at your career path, what's been the most unexpected turn that you've taken and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, sure. I started my career in risk and audit, and probably kind of 7 years into that, by surprise for me personally, I ended up moving into data and data governance. So this was actually something that I didn't necessarily see for myself. But at the time, I was working at a big grocery retailer in the UK called Sainsbury's. And the audit director and the chief financial officer, they came up to me and said, hey, we're creating this brand new role in data governance. We know that data is an area of growth and an area of risk, and we really need to focus on it. And we think you'd be great at this. And I was pretty surprised, I'll be honest. Like, I hadn't even been looking at internal job moves. I knew about this role because actually it was our department as audit and risk that were telling the leaders that we needed to create a dedicated role because data kept coming up in our risk and audit work. But I just never thought of it. And this is where I think, which is going to be a theme in our discussion, this is where it's so important having that support network, because sometimes some of the pivotal career moves and opportunities come not because it's something that we have gone after, but it's because of what others see in ourselves and our potential. So, data is an area that is still very male dominated, but it's also really exciting. It's an area of growth. It changes all the time. A lot of people who work in data don't need to have done a degree or training in data because it changes all the time. And so it's really interesting. My path has really led me here to start my own business focused on using data and storytelling to drive inclusion, to drive effective leadership. But none of this would have happened if I hadn't found this niche of data. And that all happened completely unexpectedly because others saw something in me that I didn't necessarily see for myself.
That's really nice to know, and I'm glad that you were somehow recognized and known, and and then you can come here for us then. Okay, so my next question would be, what would you consider to be the biggest professional accomplishment to date, and what made it so significant for you?
Yes, so for me, I think it was starting my own business. So if I trace back, my journey, I started at Deloitte in risk and audit in Sydney, where I grew up. And then I moved to London in my early 20s. I carried on in risk and audit. As I said, I fell kind of accidentally into data. And then through my whole career, I noticed how, I was taking on roles and I was succeeding, but against the odds. I was often the exception. There were certain barriers that I faced where when I got to the other side of those barriers, there weren't that many people that looked like me or from different backgrounds who were, for example, leading data teams. So in my last role, when I was heading up data at Chanel, I started to lean into kind of what was I really passionate about, not just what were the skills that I was really good at. And I put my hand up and I said, look, I want to make sure that I'm not the exception anymore. So I want to be a champion for inclusion during my time at Chanel. And what I found was I was able to use my specific skills around data and connect that to my purpose and my need and passion to make things better for people coming up behind me. So I realized that, my ability and skill set to understand how to collect data, how to measure data, how to define success in a tangible, measurable way, how to tell a story with data, how to know how to use data once we have it. These were all really important questions in the context of making a more inclusive organization. So I volunteered that time and my skills as part of my day job in Chanel to try and make things more inclusive. And so I guess over time I realized, hang on, I really care about this, and actually it's not separate. My purpose doesn't have to be separate from my skills. I can use my data skill set, I can use my passion for storytelling and sharing my story, and actually go out on my own, create a business and help many organizations, not just one. So for me, that was kind of the biggest accomplishment, because I never saw myself as a business owner, but I kind of found my own niche, this combination of data, storytelling, leadership, and inclusion. And then I decided to bet on myself, to be bold and follow my purpose and start my own business. So yeah, that's probably what has been a significant accomplishment for me.
I think that is a very, very kind thought. And the way you've embraced yourself and, have made storytelling and data such an, the amalgamation so beautiful. I think it's really, really tremendous, great work that you've done. Now I wanted to know, how has your experience been like embracing your identity and in the success of your career? How has that journey been like for you?
Yeah, and journey is the perfect word. It really has been a journey for me to embrace my identity. My identity as someone who has lived and worked in different countries and cultures, as someone who is a Sri Lankan Tamil woman that grew up in the West in Australia and then moved to the UK, and has worked in global companies, as someone who had one culture at home and maybe had to navigate different cultures when I walked out at the front door. It took me a while, to be honest, because I think many of us, whether it's women, whether it's people from different backgrounds, sometimes we're told, or sometimes we learn in ways where no one's actually said it to us, to hide our identity, to kind of put our head down and do the best that we can and hope our work speaks for itself, and almost try and hide parts of ourselves that maybe historically were not celebrated. But what I found is, it's taken me a while, but I realized my uniqueness is actually my superpower, and my identity is a big part of my uniqueness. I grew up feeling like I was stuck between cultures, growing up with the Sri Lankan Tamil culture as well as the Western culture. But actually, maybe I was never stuck. Maybe I know that that's actually what built my cross-cultural sensitivity and intelligence. I can work with and relate with and engage with people from all walks of life because I was doing it when I was a kid. I've faced barriers in my career where I've been underestimated because of how I look or my gender, where people haven't seen me as a leader, where I've had to work extra hard to establish credibility because people don't default look at me and assume I'm in a position of authority. But you know what? That meant that I have built an incredible sense of adaptability and resilience overcoming those challenges. And I also had to learn to be my own best cheerleader, my own best advocate, because I wouldn't always get that automatically from the people around me at work. I also know how to be that for other people. And lastly, I know the feeling of being the only one in the room, whether it's the only woman in the room, the only brown-skinned woman in the room. And I've stolen this from another amazing woman of color that I know. She said, when you walk into the room and no one else looks like you, that means that more than anything, they need you in that room. And I've owned that. If I'm the only one, well, then they really need me, and let me make sure I do what I can so I'm no longer the only one.
That is incredible. I'm sure you're like a force to reckon with when you walk into the room. I can guarantee that 100%. Okay, so you mentioned that these were some of the challenges you faced in your career, and you overcome them very beautifully. Are there any other challenges that you overcame in your professional career, and could you tell us how you've overcome them?
Yeah, so I've talked about this kind of these themes of being underestimated, not being seen as a leader, I guess other people's limitations or assumptions being placed on me. So I want to share a couple of examples because what's interesting is these things have happened at various stages of my career, not just when I was early on. So, but if I rewind to when I started out at Deloitte in Sydney, I was a graduate. I joined the graduate program. It's, if you're familiar, Big Four accounting firms. People kind of move up the ranks, especially when you're kind of entry level. It can feel quite quick. So every year there's a big new intake of graduates. So after a year, you've already got some graduates coming under you that you're shadowing and helping and bringing onto audits. I worked in client-facing work. So every few weeks, I would be at a new client, kicking off a new audit of a process. And what started to happen was I realized after a year and a half, I would be kind of the most senior person on site at the client having a kickoff meeting, and I would have a couple of junior staff members with me. What happens sometimes, not all the time, the client stakeholder, who would usually be an IT director or a finance director, in those days, most of the time, it would be kind of an older man in that position. And I'd walk into our first meeting together to kick off the audit with my junior staff members. And sometimes that client director would immediately go to the more junior male staff member and shake his hand, assuming that he was in charge and not me. So very quickly, I started to realize, even though it didn't happen all the time, maybe it was kind of only every now and then, but it was enough that it was a pattern. And I realized every time I had to walk into a new room, every 2 weeks or 3 weeks at a new client, I knew this could happen. I had to learn kind of interpersonal dynamics and how to kind of establish in a non-confrontational way my authority, how to clarify roles and responsibilities really early on to avoid any confusion. I had to kind of come in with a certain amount of confidence, even if I didn't feel it, because I realized that people wouldn't assume that I was in charge. Maybe they thought I was timid or I would be junior because of the assumptions based on what I looked like. So I had to really know my stuff. I had to be prepared for every meeting. I had to understand that I had to build a rapport and a relationship really quickly. I had to use not just my skills and what I knew, but also my personality and my charm to kind of build those relationships. But that was extra work I was doing. Those were kind of things that made me feel like each time I walked into the room, maybe this person is not going to automatically give me the respect that my role requires. So that was kind of one example. And that was the theme that would come up in my career. But then even in my last role at Chanel, I was actually brought in through a third-party recruitment company. And what was interesting was the recruiter I dealt with, he made me meet with him 3 times before I met anyone at Chanel for interviews. I'd never had that in my career. I felt like from his perspective, he was almost doing extra checks on me because he wasn't, again, trusting my resume or my CV or my experience. It felt like he was doing extra due diligence on me than other people. Again, I'd never had that at any other point in my career. He also kept saying, yes, you're great. I'm going to put you forward on the shortlist to Chanel, but of course, I'm going to put you forward as a junior candidate. And he kept saying this. And I remember at the time feeling like, I don't get why he's saying that. I'm not a junior candidate. I'm experienced. My resume and CV shows that. Data is a relatively new field, so no one had done this type of work for 20 years. It didn't really exist. These roles did not exist 20 years ago, heading up data governance functions. But I realized it was the same thing. He had his bias. He was looking at me and seeing that apparently I did not fit the mold of his idea of a senior candidate or a front runner for this type of senior role at such a big brand. So once again, I had to work extra hard. That first interview, I knew the people at Chanel had been told that I was a junior candidate, whatever that meant. So within those first few minutes, I had to make sure I came across really strongly like I knew my stuff, that I deserved to be there, that I deserved to be a front runner. But that was something that I had to deal with that potentially the other candidates didn't. And what's really important is, how do we make sure gatekeepers, people who are leaders, people who are recruiters, how do we make sure that we challenge those preconceptions that might hold certain people back? Because thankfully, I was later in my career, I had confidence, even though it didn't feel great to be told I was a junior candidate, even though I had to work extra hard in my interview. I never actually believed him when he said I was a junior candidate. But if this was earlier in my career, it could have completely affected how I came across in terms of the interview. I might have acted smaller. I might have believed him. I might not have got the offer. I would not have negotiated as strongly with my salary and accepted something that was below what I deserved. So yeah, those are the kind of things I've experienced. But how I overcame them was having a support network, because you need other people's opinions that kind of see your potential and be a sounding board. Building your own sense of kind of resilience and confidence, taking the time to know your stuff, because I realized that I couldn't necessarily be given extra chances to get things wrong than other people could. And also making sure that you're really strong in terms of building your communication style so that you can build that trust and respect quickly.
Wow, I mean, if something like that happens often, I mean, there's something really wrong. But you are one very resilient woman, and I'm sure they saw your potential and your power. And I hope this never happens to someone like you ever can. I actually wanted to ask you. I mean, it's been something we were wondering. Could you tell us about your work around empowering other women and how anyone, or like especially in the leadership role, can support women to do better in their careers?
Yeah, and exactly to what you're saying, my work around empowering women, which means that we actually empower everyone, is about trying to remove some of those barriers I just mentioned so that they don't happen, but also to make sure that women have that support network and that resilience. So if these things do still happen every now and then, we're equipped to deal with those things. So yeah, my work around empowering women is something I'm so passionate about and I find so rewarding. So with my work through my business, I've done a lot of great work designing and delivering what I call our empowerment programs for women to actually help them get into leadership or feel more set up for success if they're already in leadership roles. I've run cross-company programs like Invest in Her, which is around building peer coaching, building community, sharing stories from other female leaders on how they navigate challenges and how they develop their leadership style, as well as kind of masterclasses on skill sets like personal branding, building visibility, knowing your worth, how to advocate for yourself, and how to really kind of build networks that are going to keep us fueled and keep us succeeding. I've also done, I love sharing my story, but also bringing out the practical tips and things, the things I wish I knew and I learnt the hard way. I have done work with Barclays, for example, delivering masterclasses around owning your voice and owning your uniqueness, a bit to what I spoke about before of how do we own our identity and uniqueness as a superpower, not just in life, but for our careers. So I contributed through the Barclays Launchpad program for women and people of color globally, and that was great to see the transformation in people. And I also do small group coaching, bringing women together to work through their challenges, equipping them to be bolder with their goals, and also one-to-one mentoring and coaching, because it's really powerful to see women feel that their confidence is reinforced, that there are people championing them, people kind of holding up a mirror to their potential. I also do a lot of work with leaders. To your point, there's so much leaders can do in terms of building what I call their cheerleader or their sponsorship mindset. How can they advocate for women and people that are from underrepresented groups? How can they advocate for them when they aren't in the room? How can they invest time to understand their potential, not just how they perform, but what is the potential? What could they be doing that's different or beyond what they're doing now? And how can they run meetings to be more inclusive? How can they encourage people who are less likely to speak up about their achievements and create an environment where that's just a standard norm and it's not just the loudest people that get rewarded? And of course, my community work, My Skin, My Story, I run events to really celebrate not just women, but women that have backgrounds from other cultures, from cultures where if we look in leadership, they're not as well represented, but we want to celebrate the intersectionality of women and women of color. So yeah, it's a real joy for me to do that work.
Well, I'm sure women who hear this will be so happy and have such a good impact on their career lives hearing you say these things. I actually wanted to also delve into coaching and mentoring a little bit. I mean, have you had any impactful coaching or mentoring experience in your career, either as a recipient or as a provider?
Yeah, so this whole concept of a cheerleader mindset is something that I have worked on developing a framework for, because I had amazing cheerleaders that counteracted the barriers that I faced. I'm going to share an example of one. When I was working in that first job at Deloitte, I had a senior leader who I met with every couple of months. So every graduate was assigned what we called a counseling partner, partners being the most senior role in the organization. And you didn't report into them, but it was more to build a relationship with someone senior. This was a very tall, white New Zealander guy called Dean. And one day he brought me into his office. And it's because there had been an email going around the Sydney office saying, hey, who's interested in doing a secondment to the Chicago office? I ignored the email. I'd only been there a year. I assumed that there were other people far better equipped to go. And then Dean calls me into his office and he says, Sathya, I'm really surprised you didn't put your hand up for those secondments. I've spoken with the other partners and we think you would be great and we would love you to be part of the first cohort that goes to Chicago. Now, I said yes, but it's really important to show that I wouldn't have if Dean hadn't stepped in. What he did was what I was just talking about. Before I had even considered an opportunity, he went and spoke to other people, his senior leaders, to get consensus and build coalition and say, hey, I think not only did he advocate for me, but he got his other peers on side to see that I would be a great person to go on that secondment. He saw potential in me that I didn't see in myself, and he made me feel like an opportunity I thought was beyond me was actually perfect for me. So yeah, I'm really thankful for that. And it was such a small action on his part, but such a big impact on me.
Right. Okay, then that's nice. I mean, to have a good coach or mentor, I'm sure has been instrumental in your journey. Okay, this would be our last question for you. In your opinion, what does coaching and mentoring play in fostering professional growth and development, particularly in today's rapid changing world and environment?
So there's this saying that I've heard, and I've realized as I've got older just how important it is. Your network is your net worth. The best mentors are not just a sounding board or an advisor. It's really important to have a bunch of people around you who are your mentors, who are trusted friends, who are allies, who are champions, who are cheerleaders, people that you can get advice from, people that you can use as a sounding board. But more importantly, these are people that can be your connector. They can be a bridge. They can make introductions and expand the network of their mentee or the person that they're trying to champion. So much, and because I'm a data person, I'll bring up data. There's so much data to show that women, for example, have smaller networks than men. So there is such a important role that coaches and mentors, especially mentors, can play, or sponsors who are people with that senior influence that really want to champion you through your career. They have incredible connections. So how can you understand and work with them to say, hey, who's going to be really valuable to me, who I can build a relationship with? And these individuals can make those connections so easy. I would also say, I would not have succeeded in my career, and I've shared examples of that, without cheerleaders and mentors who advocated for me, as I said with Dean, saw the potential I didn't see, and brought opportunities to me either that I didn't know, because again, often mentors and sponsors, they're aware of things that other people aren't. And being that connector, not just of introductions and people, but also opportunities, seeing the skills that you have that are transferable, that's really powerful. And lastly, just for me personally, coaching is kind of one of the joys in my life. If I didn't need money at all, this is like all I would do, talk to people and help them. I've seen how I've been able to transform people, help them own their voice, reinforce their confidence, also give like practical tools on how to reflect on your career and grow your career. And also hold a bit of a mirror to people on their superpowers, because sometimes we're really good at knowing the things we need to work on or our development areas. We're not good at owning our strengths and our superpowers. We need a reminder. There are so many of us, especially women and people from backgrounds who haven't historically been invested in. They need an impactful support network to champion them and nurture their potential. And coaches and mentors are crucial to that.
Okay, wow. Then that I think we are all taking from this is that coaching and mentoring isn't something that we should look like we should all embrace somehow or the other. But Satya, that was a wonderful session.
Thank you.
We are incredibly grateful for you to be joining us at this WeAce Spotlight series and sharing your inspiring journey, insights, and wisdom. From forging your own niche at the intersection of data, storytelling, leadership, to working in such wonderful companies and making your name so powerful and big there. And of course, your inclusion of women empowering through initiatives like My Skin and My Story. Your impact is truly transformative. So thank you so much for your time, candor,
Thank you.
contributions. We hope to see you more, and we will continue supporting you in all the initiatives that you take upon yourself.
Thank you. It was great to have this conversation. Thanks.
It was great to speak.